Hello and welcome to Musings and Monologues, our platform for daily deliberations on issues, ideas, and events that impact, affect, or confront us. Hollywood has been celebrating the role of the serial killer in society, ostensibly for commercial reasons. It celebrates the lives of psychological deviants who kill without a purpose. There is no method in their madness, and that is what that makes them exotic and erotic for the average uninformed viewer. The height of this was reflected in a film called Serial Mom, in which Kathleen Turner portrays the role of this woman who kills at the slightest instinctive attempt of killing those who choose to disagree with her or disobey her opinions about matters that are absolutely facile and infantile. But Hollywood is hell bent on celebrating the lives of these serial killers, romanticizing them and idolizing them. In a marked departure from the traditions of Hollywood, we now have a film called Unabomber, a documentary series being shown on Netflix at present, which presents the life of Theodore Kazinsky, whose purpose was to actually teach the world a lesson for the excesses of industrial revolution and technological progress. Strange as it may seem, that is the premise with which Theodore Kaminski had set out to teach the world a lesson which they were not willing to learn otherwise. He graduated with mathematics and even did his PhD thesis on mathematics and was for 3 years celebrated as a professor of substance in a famed university in the US. He gathered enough money he could collect to retire to the confines of a jungle life, staying on the outskirts of a jungle in a rural district in America, in an unknown district in America, and set up a log cabin which he ensconced himself and locked himself from the outer world, trying to actually make bombs that could be exploded on people with the purpose of actually showing that he was annoyed with the progress of civilization, the so called progress of civilization through technological progress and industrial revolution. He stood against it, and therefore he wanted to make that point. It was almost a thesis that he wanted to propound. Thus, from 1980 to 1996, he kept on creating these bombs which he placed at very provocative positions in various university complexes, in an aircraft, in various other circumstances which could create an explosion that could kill a person and draw attention to his basic thesis. He did not succeed in killing anyone in his first 3-4 attempts, only managing to injure some people without much impact. Yet the FBI was already up against him and could not actually gather enough evidence to find who the perpetrator of the crimes was. Then he managed to name a very, very successful scientist and professor who was working for progress of civilization or so-called progress of civilization as he figured it out. And post that, he even managed to kill 3 people in the period between 1980 to 1996. In 16 years, 17 years of his mission to mangle the whole establishment that was portrayed as somebody, as some force that could actually portray the perils of industrial revolution and technological progress. In that, he succeeded in achieving his purpose, but he gave the FBI a constant blur, evading them by actually creating immaculate methods which he would mail his bombs to his targets and would not leave even a trace of his fingerprint or even a sample of hair to be found in the object which is exploded to create and trace its origins back to the perpetrator of the crime. He successfully managed to do that in splendid isolation. His neighbors, his brother, everyone, they were concerned about him being a wild hermit. Nobody even imagined, in the wildest sense of the term, that he was a perpetrator of a heinous series of crimes. It was only his brother David's wife, Linda, who traced the origins of the abnormal in him in her first interaction with him through his letters. He had never met her, nor had he even spoken to her over the telephone. Yet she discerned something which was not palpable to the world at large. Something was amiss, she thought, in Theodore Kaminsky's behavior and in his letters, articulated through his letters. But her husband, David, dismissed her doubts and was too fond of his brother to even imagine that he could be associated with such a record of atrocious crime perpetrated over a period of 17 years. The FBI failed to trace him because they could not find any trace of his fingerprints or his hair to trace his DNA and find and narrow down their choices to a person whom they suspected. It was only Linda, David's wife, who suspected that there was something abnormal with her brother in law, though she had never met him. She had only read his letters and had never even spoken to him over the telephone. But she sensed that something was not just right in the way he wrote his letters to his brother, who, completely lost in his emotional devotion to his elder brother, overlooked his wife's comments and dismissed it as rubbish. Then in 1996, Theodore actually proposed in a letter to the press that he would reveal his identity and he would show traces of the beginning of these serial bombing cases if he was allowed to publish his manuscript about the ill effects of industrial revolution and technological progress. The Washington Post finally agreed to publish this material, which went on to gain immense public recognition, and attention was drawn to the travails of this serial bomber, but yet nobody could trace it in him. It was again Linda, David's wife, his brother David's wife, who traced a similarity in the kind of language he used in his thesis and related it to the kind of written language he referred to in the letters that he wrote. And they were soon able to find some semblance between the two to actually narrow down their choices to finally nailing Ted or Theodore Kazinsky. It was through these similarities which they proposed before the FBI that the choice was narrowed from 2,417 people who had been narrowed down in their final scale to who could have been the propagator of such a thesis to Theodore finally. And the FBI descended on him with all its caution, with all its precaution, and chanced upon him in his log cabin in the woods and arrested him. It was post that he chose to actually appear before the American public and was very sure that his defense attorneys did not portray him as somebody who's insane to save him from prosecution and final death by hanging, death on the electric chair, I'm sorry. And yet he remained rigid with his belief, rigid with his idea that what he was doing was with a purpose, was not some insane act by a barbarian, but there was a lot of method in his madness, is what he wanted to portray in front of the larger world, and that he succeeded to a great extent. when he was finally asked to either admit his crime or face death penalty, he chose to admit to his crimes, and then the entire group of environmentalists and those opposed to the industrial progress and technological progress, they came out in streets and they found in him the Messiah who had actually concluded in his text and provided them the basis, the thesis on which they could propound their ideas and take to activism on the streets. Kaczynski, even today, is celebrated for that by a certain segment of the American public, minority sure, but people whose voices resonate in the world of the print media and gain acceptance in a wider social context to draw your attentions to the ills of industrial revolution and technological progress. Is that a correct assessment of the world order? Do we need progress? Do we need technological advancement? Is a question which now reverberates in many hearts outside the world of Kaczynski and his American counterparts. It exists in the worldview of people from third world countries who also have started questioning the need for technological progress, of further technological progress, and talk about the ill effects of industrial revolution. That is an idea with which you need to deliberate and find out the answers. There are no easy answers. You cannot condone the acts of Theodore Kaczynski, nor can you rubbish him away as being another serial killer with no substance. He has provided a cue with which I think all of us, thinking individuals, can actually reevaluate the process of industry and technology. It is a thought that you need to nurture and harbor in your hearts and come up with your own individual answers. For that, I leave you with this thought and do watch the eminently watchable documentary series Unabombers on Netflix. Please let me know what you feel about it by writing your comments below and have a wonderful day ahead of you. Thank you.